Hi, I'm Chuck Gibson. This is Loveland Beacon Talks, and it is my pleasure today to have with me in a remote studio Evangeline DeVol, as most of us know her, the founder and executive director of NEST, which is, of course, nutrition, education, safety, transformation. Everybody knows the NEST Foundation for kids here in Loveland and beyond Loveland, but Van DeVol is getting ready to pass the torch, and take some steps for her own future. But Van, listen, thank you so much for being with us today here.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. I always like to talk with you.
Well, we always have a good time, and in the past. So, you know what? We met, and I'm going to share this with the listeners. Van and I met 10 years ago in 2015 when NEST was, it was a vision. It was a little more than a vision. You had begun the work. You had done a lot of research. You had started paperwork in terms of the 501(c). You knew it was going to happen. But mainly when we met in 2015 for the first story, NEST was a vision. And here we are in 2025.
I know.
And so many stories I've had the opportunity to share about what NEST has done. So let's talk a little bit about what NEST has done in these 10 years before we talk about you passing the torch.
We've grown, we've changed a little bit. I have grown, I've changed a little bit. When you start something that doesn't have a template,
it evolves.
It has its own minutia, if you will. And there were things that we thought were a really good idea to put in the programming, or things that we just, wow, that sounds great. And then, 2 days in, we're like, who thought of this? Because this just isn't working anymore, right? Didn't see that coming, or whatever it happened to be. So, yes, it's evolved a lot. But the one thing, Chuck, I can say is we have served hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids for the best. And even though it's an academic program, and that's what made us so different, that we were going after academics. Yes, we had the nutrition. Yes, we had, supported the whole child, social, emotional. Yes, we had the physical activity that helped with brain development and muscle and just everything else. But we were supporting the main part of our mission, which were academics. We know that food, clothing, shelter is so important for children that grow up in poverty or low income. But we also know the only thing that's going to change that trajectory so that they don't grow up being adults living right back in the situation that they're growing up in is education. Right now in the United States, about 50% of all the children that are born in poverty will live their entire life in poverty and die in poverty. And I just don't think that's okay, because they didn't get to choose where they were born, and so they're so capable, and they can be so just hopeful, and they have such great ideas, and they have so much going for them. And all we've ever really done is looked at what they're not, all the struggles they've had. So let's flip that around and go, okay, we acknowledge the struggles, poor nutrition, a lot of family home stuff's not great. They don't have all the resources that the rest of us do. But let's look at what they're capable at. Let's put that aside. We're not going to change that for the minute, right? They are what they are. But let's change their future. And one of the things, the most important thing for us was that we wanted to make sure that even if the children were struggling academically, because over 85% of at-risk kids aren't working on grade level, but every day after they left us, they felt positive, hopeful. They knew they were precious, and they knew they had that God had a plan for them, and their future was really important.
Well, that's a very interesting aspect. And I'm glad you touched on the fact that the mission, regardless of, yes, there was nutrition, yes, there was like a safe environment, but the idea of education being the main focus. And then that's the transformation. That's the transformative piece of it, right?
Exactly.
Again, just touching here at the beginning on highlights over those 10 years. And really, it's 9, because 2015 it was still the vision and putting it together.
Yeah,
so
I was
20,
still trying to tell everybody I hadn't lost my mind. Yes, I recall that very well.
Yeah, we've had that conversation.
And
I know, like the first time we met, and she won't mind, but Lauren Aiello invited me to come and meet Van DeVol, who had this idea.
Yep.
And Lauren never said you were crazy. But when you told me what you were going to do, and that was great, it was a great story. I was wonderful to share it with our readers at that time. Writing with the Cincinnati Enquirer and the Loveland Herald, community press newspapers, and it was a wonderful story, and it was a well-received story. But I did. I don't mind telling. I said, "You're crazy. How are you going to do?" But it was not. It's not like she needs to be put away crazy.
Right.
It's like, this is so far out there. But here we are.
Yep.
2025.
And 19 awards later.
Tell me a little bit about some of those awards and accomplishments. And then the other thing, before we even get to that, first question, it is, almost 10 years later.
Yeah.
You've had some children at the start of that who have now graduated from high school. Yeah.
And
what is that like for you?
First of all, I'm not that old. But second of all, that's a big laugh.
She is young, people.
You need to contain yourself. So, but I have had a lot of the kids stop back and come and give me a hug and say, if it hadn't been for you and the NEST program, this, that, and the other. But we, even the kids that I don't know where they are, because when you're in subsidized housing, things change a lot all the time, and sometimes, that community is very transient. It has to, for lots of different reasons. But what I do know is, at first I would get very upset when the kids were evicted or had to move or whatever, and then I can remember driving one of our mobile classrooms home, and we just lost a family of 3 boys, and they had to move out. They'd been evicted, and they were working so hard, and I can remember driving it home, just tears rolling down my face, and saying, I'm just all upset about it. And I really believe the Lord whispered to my soul and said, but you're not the only one that I'm going to put forward to care for them. Just because you're not in their lives doesn't mean that they're forgotten or not seen. And it drew me back for a minute, and then I thought, you know what? We're all of us are part of who we are, are little pieces of other people and experiences and things like this. And I know that with these 3 boys, they knew they were important. They knew they had a destiny. They knew that we'd pour into them every time we worked with them, that you're going to be so successful when you grow up. It didn't matter to us how they were successful. We knew if you have to, half the journey is believing in yourself. One of the things that we always did with the kids when they joined our program is we asked them what they wanted to be when they grew up. Yeah. And it almost didn't matter what they said, but we would keep that dream in front of them. For instance, if they didn't want to read a passage in their book and answer comprehension questions, we would say, now when you're an attorney, or when you're, going to do this, or when you're going to do that, whatever their dream is, when you're going to be an NFL star, you're going to have to read a contract, and you're going to have to pull the things out that are really important to you and really meaningful. You're just getting a head start to figure out how to do that. So we kept that dream alive for them. And they believed in us, and we believed in them, still do.
Well, you can see, if the listeners can only hear, and you can still hear it in your voice, Van. Mm-hmm. But for me, I get to see your facial expressions and the impact that it had. I mean, you're telling a story, and it's alive in your mind and in your eyes right now as you share it. But, and that's important, obviously, and I'm sure it just repeated itself over and over again over the years. But the nice thing to tell you, because how do you know when you have a vision and then you start it, how do you know that you're doing the right thing? Well, you just mentioned over those 9+ years, 19 different awards. Those have to say, we're moving in the right direction. were making a difference. Tell us a little bit about some
Well,
of the recognition.
A lot of the recognition we got, obviously, through the chamber or the chamber in Claremont County.
Right.
But then we also got recognition from places, teachers, Retired Teachers Association. Heck, I'm now an honorary Daughters of the American Revolution because we got an award for our work with American kids. I didn't have the heart to tell them that I grew up in England. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. but that's the kind of recognition we had. I was invited to write some articles, which I did. I've been on other podcasts, which I have been. And we've gotten recognition even up at the state level. So, and it's just been, we won, in 2019, we won $109,000 from the Impact 100 folks.
Right.
And
that's
that
the one
was
I was trying
huge.
To remember was the Impact 100.
That was huge. So, because all these women believed in what we were doing. And I've had people that reached out to us, like on the school board down in Cincinnati, and said, "Can you figure out how to do this to bring it down here?" But we, concentrate on rural and suburban kids because since 2012, there are more children at or below the poverty level outside of the city footprint. Yeah. And then if you add on top of that out in the suburbs and rurally, you don't have the safety net. Now, we can argue all day long whether the safety net's any good or not, but that we do out in the suburbs. I mean, until recently, we didn't have a clinic. We didn't even have anything like that. We still don't have a metro bus that goes through here.
Right.
So the food pantry was not open as much as it is now. And so if you are low income and didn't have a car, you're not in Kansas anymore. How do you you have to walk to get a job, or how do you maneuver this? And then on top of that, traditionally, suburban and rural schools were not used to dealing with the academic needs, no fault, academic needs of children in poverty, and how they learn differently, and all the cognitive development that they go through sometimes is really hurt because of trauma that they've gone through. And there's just the nutrition. I mean, all these things. We know that the human brain doesn't finish developing until you're in your 20s. And between nutrition and trauma and high cortisol and all the uncertainty, it actually stunts your cognitive development. And the two things that it goes after, toxic stress more than anything, are executive functioning skills and short and long-term memory. Right. Well, those are the two things that in our current educational system, those are the two things that are going to make you successful. So we have to reteach a lot of skills as well as do homework, so that the kids, they do learn. They just can't always bring it back out. And so we've developed all these ways of teaching through the years that make it very impactful. Now, COVID really messed things up pretty badly for everybody. And the kids that had to stay home during COVID, and I don't care whether they're at-risk kids or not, by the time COVID was over,
everybody got set back.
Not only set back, but behavior was terrible. I mean, we had all these parents that were trying to do stuff at home, and it was just, it changed everything.
Right.
And they were very far behind still.
Yeah. Well, I was going to, on that note, I was going to say, just imagine COVID for the schools and for the school children without Nest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were, I don't know if you remember, we were like the Pony Express because
I know. No, I remember.
We used to take stuff out to them the whole time that school was closed.
Right.
So,
well, that was, what Nest did, and in all honesty, other organizations, certainly in the Loveland community.
We had the ability to get out there because we had the vehicles.
Right.
So,
made a big difference.
we get dressed up in hazmat suits pretty much, and I think back on it, I just go. But
it's not funny, but it's like, man, like you said, thinking back on that, you're just shaking your head as you are right now.
And, we had a lot of kids that came from tough background, tough homes.
Yeah.
And they didn't fare well at all because there was more abuse. There was more everything. And one of the things that we worked with the police very hand in hand with them during COVID is we did wellness checks on our kids.
Right.
Because we had to. And if, everybody, when they came back, if they hadn't heard or seen a child in 2 days, they had to let me know, and then I would find them. Some of them had been sent off to grandparents, because moms couldn't take care of them, whatever, in Goshen or in Batavia or whatever. But we needed to know where these kids were, because there was no other way of making anything accountable.
Right. Well, you made it. You made it through there with them, and despite whatever setbacks, you've kind of moved them forward again. Development. You talked about development. That's a key word. So you have, in these 10 years from 2015 through 2025, been a huge piece, obviously, as the founder and executive director, developing Nest. But now there's new developments, so we're going to skip forward.
Okay.
I think we've highlighted Nest pretty well. So what is happening? Where are you going? You're passing the baton, Van.
I am.
I was stunned. Absolutely stunned. And I'm sure many other people in the community. We just thought Van DeVol and Nest were one and the same forever and ever. Amen. But anyway, so what's coming up for you? What's next? Tough question, right?
Where do we start?
What are you allowed to share?
Go now?
Number one,
Nest will continue for sure,
yeah.
and the board is very, very busy at putting all those pieces together. It's going to look perhaps a little different than it did because the demographics that we serve are a little bigger. When we first started, about 14% of children in Loveland schools were on free and reduced lunch or qualified for them, and that's the only way you really know income-wise whether they're low income. And now the school just reported that it's 20%. Now some of it is generational poverty. Some of it is situational poverty, like somebody's lost a job or whatever, and they usually recover from that. But that's a stunning amount. Yeah. Stunning. So.
Well, the hope would have been that you would see the numbers decrease, but that's just not the fact.
But it's not the fact. And they're coming from, they're more spread out now. We lost one of our, Chapelwood Apartments used to take Hamilton County vouchers, for rent and stuff. They don't anymore since that was sold. So there's a lot of things that have changed, and we've done the same old for a really long time. And now we're coming at it. Education is still the main focus, but we're going to come at it. The board is looking at different ways of coming at it from a different perspective. But for me personally, so in 2018 we had a fundraiser down at Redmore, downtown, and it was done for us by the Exchange, Southern Eastern Hills Exchange. We just call it Exchange, but it's a business group. Anyway, they decided to do a fundraiser for us, and they had music and pizza and all this other kind of stuff, and I got a chance to talk. And one of the people that they had there to perform, his name is Dan Varner. Right. So Dan Varner is he's a country artist, he's a producer, he's a songwriter, you name it kind of thing. Right. And he was part of that, and he came, this was all a God thing, he came down and performed. Well, after that was all done, a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from him. Didn't think much about it, whatever. He said, I heard you speak. He said, he said, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't know. So anyway, we became fast friends back and forth, and then we had him do another fundraiser for us. And again, I got the same questions. And at this point now, we have mutual friends and all the rest of it. And he kept saying, what do we do? I want to do something. Long story short, I said, in the meantime, I'll get back. In the meantime, one of the biggest needs that I'm seeing from our kids are a lot of our kids are going into foster care and kinship care. And by the time they come back, they're in way social emotional worse shape, academic worse shape, all this kind of stuff. And I started looking, just like I started looking into what poverty looked like in the United States, and was stunned when I did all my research before I started Nest. I was stunned when I started looking into the foster care, kinship care, and how the system is so terribly broken, antiquated. It doesn't work. Its results aren't good for the most part. And when I got in deeper, I realized that most foster families will give up a placement within the first year, 50%, because they don't have the resources and they don't feel supported with the kids. I mean, it's just
and
it's
so
unbelievable.
This child just gets displaced again.
The average amount of times that a kid in foster care is moved is 5 times. So anyway, I started looking into that, and I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? So when Dan said to me, I want to help, he said, maybe start my own thing. I said, do you want to start your own thing? Here is what I'm going to say. Why don't you start a foundation to raise money to help the foster kids, help the families of foster children, or kinship. There could be grandparents that are having to watch their grandchildren on fixed income, standing in the resource gaps for these families. And not as this is a want, it has to be a need. Because we want to stop this revolving door for these kids if they're in good replacements. So he agreed, and there were several other friends of ours that jumped onto the bandwagon. So in 2020, because who doesn't want to start another nonprofit during COVID, it became the Varner Foundation for Children and Families. Well, between Nest and I was their part-time volunteer ED. And it's Varner Foundation is very different because that's a pass-through nonprofit, where Nest is, it's not a pass-through. We actually have programming and things like that.
Right.
So it's very, very different. So as I got into that and got introduced to other people and talked to just all these entities, it's just Beach Acres, ProKid, all kinds of stuff, I started to realize that the issue with children in this country that do not have a voice, that are invisible. I can tell you some stories that Scott O'Reilly, who used to be the #1 prosecutor for crimes against children in Claremont County, he's now out in Brown and is still doing the same thing, would make you just wail. The tears would just start. Stuff that's going on with these kids because nobody knows where they are, what they're doing. They don't know that they existed. A lot of that happened over COVID. And how these kids are it's just gut-wrenching. And then when the open borders came and all the cartel were coming over and they were making these fake little family units and traveling, why not to come to Dayton? Because Dayton is considered the opiate capital of the United States, and they're discarding these kids, and these kids are getting purchased for sex trafficking and all. I went, okay, I've got to step away from Nest, which, by the way, is my only income, and I am going to be just like it, and I'm going to take a walk of faith, just like I did with Nest Community Learning Center. And I got, the Lord kept saying, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. You've got a voice, you know enough. Just get out there and be the voice for these kids.
With Varner Foundation.
Well, I'm still going to be associated with them, but hopefully I'm still going to be associated with Nest too. It's still the same community of kids.
Right.
But I'm just going to be independent in the sense that I want to write and speak and teach. I've taught, at Boys and Girls Club Cincinnati, I taught a whole course on how to integrate neurodivergent children into a classroom setting. So,
so for clarity, though,
yeah.
that was the point. So you really are, as you just said,
Yeah.
you're going to take that walk of faith again. It's not like Dan Varner said, "Here, come,
Nope.
we're going to give you a set."
No.
You're just going out there, DeVol,
Yep.
or Evangeline DeVol,
Yeah.
to some new people that don't know you yet.
Yeah.
But
write and
speaking,
speak
writing,
and teach.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to help other little nonprofits. Most of them. So everybody starts a nonprofit because they have a story, something that really touched them. It's
Sure.
usually someone in their family really suffered or whatever it happens to be, and they get into this nonprofit world and go, "Oh my goodness, I'm over my head." So I'm also I would like very much to help other nonprofits, figure out their way, because this country can't do it without nonprofits. We can't exist without them. And everybody, it just is very overwhelming. So I'm going to do a lot of consulting. In fact, I've got a gig already out in Adams County with a wonderful judge out there that's trying to do some stuff for their kids. They started a nonprofit, and they're all for all the right reasons. So that's where I feel like I'm being led, is to do all those things that I do. Like we talked in the beginning, I know nonprofit world. I know these children. I know poverty. I know. I spent a lot of time with a Dr. Jerome Schultz, who at the time was doing some work with Harvard Medical School, and he fed my. I love to learn, and he fed that whole part of me that wanted to know more and more and more about the brain and how it develops in children, and he did that for me. So I'm going to take all those little pieces that I know and hopefully help a lot more children.
we got about 5 minutes.
Yes,
and in those 5 minutes, one of the things I want to throw out first, and this is like selfish on my part. So you're going to write.
Yes.
And it's not totally selfish, but if it will help you and you want to write and share some stories, pass them along. I'm happy to publish those on Loveland Beacon. If there's any way, obviously we'll talk again.
Sure.
We talked a number of times over the last 10 years. I expect we'll continue to talk. People can expect to hear from you some more on some future Loveland Beacon Talks podcasts, I hope. But again, please, share some stories or whatever it is, some information as this develops, and I'm happy to share that out through Loveland Beacon.
No, I really appreciate that. I'm still getting my footing.
Well, you're still. Technically,
this is going to be kind of scary here for a while, because I'm like once again in my life, my adult children, are looking at me and going, "Mom, you've given up your salary again?
What are you doing?
What are you doing?" And I'm standing there, tears running down my face, going, "No, this is what the Lord wants me to do, and I'm sure He'll take care of me that He has before." So it truly is a walk of faith.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for you to take the time and share that with us here on Loveland Beacon Talks. And I'm dead serious. Share more.
Thank you.
And even if you get down the road and I haven't called and said, let's do a podcast, if you think you got something you want to share, and hey, let's do a 10-minute, whatever, something like that along the way. For people, at the same time right now, when people hear this, as you are listening to this, it's going to be May the 27th, because we're recording this on May the 26th on Memorial Day.
Right.
Happy Memorial Day
Thank
to
you.
We already did the cemetery visits and things, honoring those who have fallen. But they're going to hear this May the 27th or beyond, and until May 31st, right. I lost my mind. April has 30, May has 31.
Yeah.
But anyway, so through May 31st, technically, you are still the executive director of Nest.
But
and then after that, boom.
Email. Well, I have a new email.
Share that.
And hopefully people reach out if they just want to ask questions, or they're looking for a speaker, or they're looking for some advice, or they want to join me in this wild, wacky new thing. But it's DeVol, so it's EDEVOL info@gmail.com.
At Gmail. So
DeVol,
and that's a V like Victor, and DeVol, info@gmail.com.
Yep.
and you can reach
You
Van
can reach
that way.
me there, and just
if you want to help,
if you want to help, you got some ideas. You want, I would love. I've talked with churches or you name it, and I'm your girl.
Well, you have a story to tell. So I'm glad you said you have a story to tell, and usually you do it very powerfully. I've heard you speak on more than one occasion, certainly at Nest events. Mm-hmm. But for people that are hearing this now, email her, edevol.info@gmail.com. If you'd like to have her come speak, you guys can work out the details, and she can share some stories and maybe help your organization do whatever.
Absolutely. Or an organization that really wants to help kids and doesn't really know where to land.
Yeah.
Because not that food's not important, but everybody likes to feed kids. And I think it's great, but there's so many other needs that people can meet that you don't even know you can meet yet.
Right.
Let me know.
So the focus, again, for clarity, so your focus is going to remain helping the children.
Oh, that's
and
my
the families
whole life.
with those children.
Yeah, that's my whole life. My whole life is these children that, and I don't take this lightly, that are invisible, that are voiceless, and have been robbed of their future. And we know how to fix this. And on Memorial Day, and I said this when I was talking on the radio earlier today, when we set our mind as a community or as a country on fixing something, whether it's going to war or whatever, we stand up for all the people that have been haven't been as fortunate as us and really have a high hill to climb. We get it done. Yeah. We need to get this done. We have to get this done.
Well, if what you've done in the past is any indication of what's to come in the future, you'll get the next thing done. And I want to, just on behalf of so many people in our community and beyond, thank you for what you've done with Nest, and wish you the very best going forward with Van DeVol info, edevol.info@gmail.com. But Van, listen, thank you so much for joining us here.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
It was a treat. And for listeners, that is Loveland Beacon Talks for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Chuck Gibson. Until next time.